Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Author Eke. Today I have Russell Cowdrey. He is a relatively new author like myself, and going to let him introduce himself. You know how we do on Author Eke. We'll start where it's kind of regimented, and then we just kind of go for the free-for-all, whatever kind of suits my fancy or whoever I'm talking to, and we can get off on different tangents and topics. So, Russell, be ready. All yours, man.
It sounds great. Travis, thank you for having me on. I like I was saying, uh, take one. Uh, really appreciate your service. You just had Veterans Day, and
Thank you.
I listened to snippets of a few of your other guests, and a really interesting collection of folks from around the country, around the world, and most of them are veterans, and so really impressive. Um, so I'm Russell Cowdrey. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from England. I'm from Texas,
Yay,
and
Texas.
grew up in a small town in North Texas named Bowie, named after the famous Alamo hero. And, and so, anyways, I like you joined the masses. For me, it was COVID was the trigger. Masses of authors that I think have come online, and it's an interesting time uh, to be an author. But in the last couple of years, really been hard at work at it. Released my first two books. First one in February, Ancient Civilizations, book one of Lamentations of Magic, and released book two, Echoes of Ancients. It's really kind of set up to be a trilogy with the
Mhm.
possibility of more going on. That came out, Echoes of Ancients came out in August. And so, um, really excited, you know,
Yep.
to be here with you and learn from you, because I think we're all kind of going through this journey and at different speeds and learning different things. So,
Excellent. Well, I'm actually in Allen, Texas. So
right.
if I was better prepared,
Well,
folks, then we would have met in person.
well, that's okay. I mean, we did get introduced at my hometown's local. I live in Coppell, and our local library had an Indian.
Yep, sure did.
That's where
Sure.
you and I hooked
Yep.
up. Great to meet you there and the other authors. So,
Yeah, we had a good time. It was a good crowd, and I really appreciate Capella Library doing that for indies because it's tough, just getting everything out. So I'm very interested in. I love ancient civilizations. So I've been to Egypt, I've been in the pyramids, so I'm really interested in that. So kind of walk us through what what stroked your interest and your research. So what was the mechanics
sure.
behind that or your process?
Uh, well, just the interest in it all, goes back to your childhood. My mother was a reader, and of the age that she said I started reading pretty early. I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
that part of it, but she back then they had book clubs, and she said you get to pick two book clubs.
Mm-hmm.
They'd ship you, you get a little flyer and pick the books you wanted. So I picked the science fiction and fantasy book club, and I picked the history book club. And I've kind of been a nerd and a geek for both ever since then. I think I wanted to be an Egyptologist or a general. Those were the two things, and I was neither. Right once I grew up, so I'm getting to live out some of that, and as I write these books. And so when COVID came around, I was in tech my whole business
Mm-hmm.
career. 2014, I started a startup trying to get into the social media game. Had a company, a little startup, raised quite a bit of money, but we didn't quite make it. Called Plum, people like you and me.
Mm-hmm.
COVID came around. I was already working on a second startup, and COVID killed that. So
Yep.
I had a lot of time to read. I read tons and tons on Kindle Unlimited, and I saw these um, indie authors that were being successful, and they were putting out stories that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And but they weren't Mark Twain, they weren't Shakespeare, they weren't Longfellow. They were good, solid writers that had a story to tell, and so that kind of got me into it. And as I started to think, well, what do I want to write? What is that story that's inside of me? And I think when we get into the business side of things, you'll go, well, you made lots of mistakes going down this path, but it was the story I wanted to write.
Mm-hmm.
So Ancient Civilizations, Lamentations of Magic is really Indiana Jones meets Stargate. And if you're an old school sci-fi person, I stole a little bit from Jerry Pournelle's Janissaries series. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted it to have a lot of fun, fast-paced action. I wanted it to have a ton of history and archaeology, and I wanted to be able to work in all those different infamous and famous civilizations and throughout
Mm-hmm.
history into kind of the plot and the world that I built. And so that's kind of what got me started. Um, I failed in my initial cast. I was going to make Indiana Jones slash Josie Wales was my main character. I wanted him to be
Mm-hmm.
that kind of guy, and that is not what I developed. I
Things
failed at
morph
that.
into as you build them.
As you get into it, and so I had kind of set some writing prompts for myself as part of the outlining of this book, and
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to work some Indian British soldiers into the book, and
Huh.
so that's how I picked the timeline. So I
Mm-hmm.
picked 1883 Egypt because in 1882 the British invaded Egypt and took it over. And I researched the heck out of it, what Indian units were in Egypt at the time, and the 13th Bengal Lancers were there. And so I've done a ton of research around that unit, where they came from and what they were about. But then as I'm doing research for the players in archaeology players, the political players in Cairo in 1883, I ran across this footnote in history that kind of changed the trajectory of these two books and the book I'm currently writing. So the man, the British noble that took over Egypt and managed it for the next 20 years, he was the first Earl of Crowmere. I don't know if
Hmm.
I say that right. And, Evelyn Baring was his name, and he footnote in his Wikipedia that when he was a young artillery officer stationed in Corfu, Greece, he had an illegitimate daughter, Louisa Sophia. And from that footnote, my mind just kind of went crazy. And
Oh
so
wow. Yeah.
here's this illegitimate child of a very powerful man. Her only two footnotes are in history. She was born, and when she turned
Mm-hmm.
18, she received an inheritance. So we know he's maintained her access. And so I took
Mm-hmm.
that and ran with it. And if you've ever watched the Mummy movies, the good ones, with
Oh yeah, I
Brendan
love them.
Fraser, yeah, Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, I kind of flipped the script on that. So I have Ben McGehee, he's my idealistic archaeologist, and then I have Luis, a very jaded thief type character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that kind of was the impetus for that. One of the other writing prompts I had was to kind of include some of my personal history, I guess. I've adopted a
Mm-hmm.
lot of children, foster parent. So
Oh, good for
that's
you.
one of thank you. And so my third point of view in the book is a young man named Abu, and Ben ends up unofficially adopting him, when he's orphaned. So those are the 3 points of view in the series. And even though I try to stick to that fun, action, all those other
Mm-hmm.
things, I really wanted to have that kind of found family uh, underlying thread to the whole thing. So
Excellent. And
that's what I've
so,
been doing.
so when you walk in the Perot Museum, they go, "Oh, not you again." You're doing your research, or the. They just take it this time. Bring it back when you're done. Uh, so
You
you
know,
have to do a tremendous amount of research.
yes. And that research could not be possible without us being in this modern age. I don't know how people wrote
Mm-hmm.
any kind of historical fiction back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't have the resources that we have. Even today, I mean, history is this like very fuzzy impressionist painting, right? We know that it's not the reality what we read isn't exactly what happened. It's what the people who wrote the history books say it happened. And then there's the, well, what really did happen, and then your mind goes wild with, what might have happened, what crazy things could happen. That's where all these story ideas come from. And I think that's where my passion is. And the struggle with social media is as an author. And
Yeah, but you
so
got to do
many,
it.
you
Got to do
got
it.
to do it. But and I haven't fully embraced this yet. But sort of,
Hmm.
I created a Substack called History is Magic, and that's where I'm discussing, releasing early chapters of the work I'm working
Excellent.
on. I'm doing author notes around the history that I'm putting into the the
Oh, that's
history research
interesting.
that I'm doing. And so I think that's where I'm going to go with all of my
Mhm.
TikToks and everything. It's really going to be about the history and what I'm researching and what I'm learning, because that's where my passion lies. And I
Well,
think when we
hopefully,
get out here,
so hopefully somebody, some young individual, will look and say, you know what? So I do have to do research, and this is how you do research, right? This is how you document your research. So as they go through their, school or whatever, maybe they're struggling about people. Some people don't know how to research, right? They just
mhm,
don't. So maybe that could help them, because just the knowledge that you gain from research, whether it's online or in a movie or uh, reading a book or whatever, is fundamental to be able to really start your mind being creative. So
mhm.
that's, I think, the catalyst.
Yeah, I agree. I one of those milestones as a new author. I had a teacher reach out. She had a middle school student who had, I guess, read my book and wants to
Mm.
talk to me
Oh, that's
or
awesome.
interview me or whatever. And so I'm like, hey, that's fantastic. So,
Yeah,
and it goes to what you're talking about there.
yeah.
And if any teachers are out there, I'm actually offering a free book. You just go to my website. There's a teachers
Mm.
link, and I'm giving away about 50 books to teachers and administrators out there. So if anybody wants that's how this young person found me.
So
So
what do you find interesting about Egypt? Because some of it take. I mean, what are the? I mean, I know what I find interesting. So what?
well,
I mean, is
first
it the
I'm jealous.
pyramids? Is it? Yeah.
So I'm very jealous that you've been. It's been on my bucket list forever, and it
Mhm.
just hasn't happened. I've traveled quite a bit, but that isn't where I've been. And back to my childhood, my grandparents traveled, and they had these slides, and I've inherited the slides. I still have them.
Oh, wow,
And
that's
they went
cool.
all. It's very cool. They went all over the world, and I just remember being a young child
Hey,
sitting there.
Russell,
You
you want to tell the younger people what slides are?
Well, they took a negative of a picture and they overlaid it onto a projector and, and put it up there on the screen. It's a very archaic. That's kind of how we
Look it
didn't
up, folks.
have.
Look it up. They're awesome.
Yeah, look it up. Um, that'll be in some historical research for somebody soon. Um,
Click, click. What is this thing?
but they went to Egypt, they went to Israel, they went
Mhm.
to they were behind the Iron Curtain at one point, and they just
Oh,
went
wow.
everywhere. And I got to live and experience that through their journeys as a young child. And I think that helped fuel my love of that. As far as Egypt itself, it's just so fascinating. Like I said, I wanted to be an Egyptologist when I was
Mhm.
young, and I still I subscribe to Archaeology magazine. That's kind of nerd I am,
Oh,
and and a lot of it is to get. I mean, that magazine's great because it takes me all over to places that I haven't really researched and
Mhm.
done a lot of. But Egypt is kind of mysterious. I mean,
Mhm.
you have this very. I mean, they have their different writing systems. Hieroglyphics are just kind of mesmerizing, and
Mhm.
you think, what? How did anybody communicate with something like this? Until you look at cuneiform, and then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe this is a better
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously the engineering marvels and the organization that it took for that society at that time with the tools that they had available to them. It
Hmm.
really is just a fascinating place that I hope to someday get to visit and get to those pyramids. Yeah.
But so I went there on a Friday, and it's like the Egyptians go. That's like the beach to them. I think that's where they go on Fridays, and
Uh,
or I think it was Friday. And you go up to there, and you go, well, they're big. You know, you're thinking, okay, they're big. But when you get there, they're big. I mean, the stones. I don't even know how they moved them around. And there's a saying that man fears time, time fears the pyramids,
oh,
because they'll always be there. They're remarkable, remarkable. It's an
I
amazing place. The
again,
people
I'm Jack.
people are wonderful. I was in the army at that time, and the people were, still wonderful people. So I highly want to recommend someone to go and maybe not now, but whenever possible.
And that's all. That's always been the rub for me is it's just when I had the money, the
Hmm.
time, the whatever, they were in chaos, and
Right.
so I ended up going other places to Rome, to Greece, those kinds of things.
Well, in
But
Texas, you can go to Italy, you can go to Paris, you can go to
been to both.
Athens, all in a day. So this was, but so
Yeah.
did all your books take place in Egypt, or are there other ancient lands that you
So
venture off to?
so there's the Stargate. The book one starts in the Louvre with my thief actually stealing
Hmm.
some pyrite from the Louvre, and goes to Egypt. But then obviously there's the Stargate element.
Hmm.
So um, one of the reasons I kind of did this is I read a lot of portal type fantasy. It's a genre of books where people get transported into a new world and thrown into the situation.
Hmm.
And what kind of has bothered me about that genre is that, like, people transport in chapter one. So I don't know who these people are. I don't know why I care about them. And so I really wanted to establish my characters. And so that first half of book one takes place all in Egypt.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really just 100% historical fiction, Indiana Jones stuff. But then you get to the tripping, this tipping point where they find a device, pretty much like a Stargate. They accidentally activate it, and they end up on a planet named Aru, which Aru in ancient Egyptian mythology is the field of reeds. And so that's how I kind of weave in some of that.
Hmm.
And once they land on Aru, the adventure just goes completely in a different direction in that they're, confronted with ancient civilizations that are at war. There's magic on this world, but it's all driven by ancient alien technology. And so I don't even know if my readers pick up on that. A lot of them are like, "Oh, the
Oh wow.
magic's a little unbelievable," but it's all grounded in science fiction. Everything that I've been doing, um, and so there's multiple alien races. There's a reason that human civilizations have been pulled into this other world, and so I've intertwined their timelines. And the amount of research that I put into that to be like, oh well, you know, part of Perdiccas's army when he was fighting Ptolemy to get Alexander's body back, they
Hmm.
disappear and they get taken Shanghai essentially. And I do that with civilizations, and I have to make the timeline work up. And so I've got some of the Indian civilizations.
Hmm.
I've got Sumerian on in mixed in with all of this, and so it's quite expansive. It's hard to kind of explain what's going
Hmm.
on
Right.
unless I'm
Well,
getting to
well,
talk to you
that's
like this.
tough. That's tough
Yeah.
in timelines in books, making sure everything kind of lines up. If you're running multiple threads in a book, that they all line
Hmm.
up. And so you do one, and then all of a sudden, like, well, what happened, like, 5 days ago? Where's this character been, or how do you make it come together to make it
Book
fluid?
book three. Well, I'm writing book three, but it's a prequel, and
Hmm.
but working on book three of the series to kind of wrap up everything that's going on. I now have a spreadsheet with multiple columns to try to get that timeline. Here are all my main characters, my secondary characters, the different plot lines. How do they line up? Because my entire book, the second half of the book and the other book, it takes place in like 50 days, and I keep like a running timeline of it. It's a pretty quick
Right.
paced kind of thing. But you introduce these characters that people like, and they're like, well, what happened to that person? And you can't forget them. And as you work them into the thread for the next book. So yeah, it's more of a challenge, and I've bitten off quite a bit, but I'm excited to
So
get to
when
that.
we're an ancient civilization, and they come
Mhm.
back, and of course they have an Excel license because they'll probably never ever go away. They're going to access your spreadsheet, and the guy goes, "How did he know about this already?" So,
I've worked
you
really
rewrote our
hard to where
history.
I've worked really hard to tie it to the Earth timeline to where in some mystical universe it can
Mm-hmm.
happen. Um, like
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese civilization that I brought over, I, I took that to be so there was the very powerful Shogun clan, and their kind of timeline was maybe a couple years off for what I needed, but I'm like, okay, history is kind of fudgy on a couple of years here and there. I took
Right.
them because they ended up all committing suicide because there was a big civil war, and this whole clan
Wow.
got surrounded by their enemies, and they just essentially killed off their own clan. And so in my book, the clan gets taken to my, you know, they disappear
Mm-hmm.
from Earth, but it's not something that couldn't have happened kind of stuff. That's kind of the way I try to work the timelines
Huh.
into it and how much detail I go
Interesting.
into it, which no one will care but me.
I'm
It's
gonna
kind of
have to
crazy.
get I'm gonna have to get a couple of your books. My grandson would love that stuff. He loves reading that stuff. So that would be awesome. Of course, he'll quiz me, and I'm like, yeah. But so you've written 2 books. You're writing your third. Are you
Right.
self-published, or do you have a publisher,
Yeah.
or how do you go about doing that?
So I'm completely self-published. I did just get a deal recently with Podium Audio. Um, and I got that deal, I think, because I made a connection with another author who worked with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I guess because, going out and doing an audiobook yourself, it could run you 5, 6 grand, depending on how
Oh yeah.
big, how long your book is. In Podium, I'm going to get less royalties, but they're going to be doing all the production. They've already cast the narrator, and he's done other science fiction series that's cool and really good, easy listening voice. So I'm excited about that. That starts in January. Hopefully in
Mm-hmm.
March they will actually release the first book one. So we have a 3 book deal,
Oh, awesome.
and so that means I have all this extra pressure to get book three, the very complex. But in the meantime, I've distracted myself because I'd already plotted out this other prequel because I fell in love
Mm-hmm.
with that Louisa Sophia character, and when I
Mm-hmm.
built her background, um, I really I fell in love with trying to get her educated in the 1880s and being at the same level as my archaeologist character, and and so I tried to find a boarding school for her in Europe, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up settling on there's these 200-year-old, they're now 200 years old, schools created by Napoleon, the Legion d'Honneur, and they're hereditary.
Mm-hmm.
And I say hereditary, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to have won the Legion d'Honneur, or which is their equivalent of like the Medal of Freedom, and they give them out to lots of people, even
Mm-hmm.
non-French folks. And or you have to
Yeah.
get their like Medal of Honor, and then your daughter, your
Mm-hmm.
granddaughter, and your great granddaughter can attend these schools. So I kind of started researching. I was like, this is like female Hogwarts, but in reality, right? I mean, they had 3 levels of schools. They had one for like the privates, the one, the NCOs, and then they had their officer
Mm-hmm.
corps that their daughters could go to. And the lower 2 schools were all run by nuns, and it was a very kind of harsh. And I'm getting all my research from a diary, and the work around this diary that one of the girls wrote while there. So, anyways,
That's amazing.
that's a long story.
That,
I went down this rabbit
that's
hole,
amazing.
and and so my wife and I were going to go on a trip to Portugal. And on that trip, I was like, I can't do everything at this school in Paris. It's in St. Denis, which is a suburb of Paris, and it exists today. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm now communicating with staff there. So when we went to Portugal in last year, I guess, last March, I plotted out this book and I incorporated all the places that I went when I was in Portugal and drawing all the historical facts from that.
Mm-hmm.
So this book is called Luisa Sophia and the Last. I've just changed the title. Luisa Sophia and a Legion of Sisters, and it's kind of a young adult, 17-year-old girls, and the
Mm-hmm.
premise is that the girls that attended St. Denis, they were destined to kind of marry into the upper echelon of
Mm-hmm.
French society, either the general officers' corps, diplomat, so forth, nobility. And
Mm-hmm.
so this tour, fictional part of it, is that the girls that are the outcasts, that they don't have maybe the social standing, the school offers them this tour where they take them out to socialize and meet outside of Paris circles. And so in this case, they're actually going to Portugal and going to meet and try to get the girls some husbands. And my main character thinks this is absurd and barbaric, and the modern 1874 woman would ever want to participate. But uh, the bully in her school decides to go along to torture her and her friends, and so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of misadventures take place from that point forward. And so
Excellent.
I'm
Excellent.
doing tons
Are you
and
going to work Portugal
tons of
into it?
research.
Are you working Portugal into it? Are you going to work Portugal
So
into
that
it? That's the thing.
Portugal is a very big part of it. About a third of the way through the book, they've have some stuff at school. They go down river, catch a steamboat.
Mm-hmm.
Pictures of an actual steamboat that would have been running that line or pretty close to that line. Lots of research into that. It was amazing the level of luxury and comfort on those cruise ships in the 1870s. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably where the first working toilets were really put into play, indoor plumbing. And they go up to Porto and then make their way up through the Douro Valley and then on up to Lisbon. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I'm working a ton of history in. The other day, I discovered this thing called chain boats. Maybe you're aware of them. But for about 30 years on the rivers in Europe and in America, they used to run a big cable through just down on the river floor bed,
Mm-hmm.
and they would hook an actual boat up to it, and it would have a winch that would pull the chain and wrap around and pull
I've never even heard of that.
the
Yeah.
boat. Yeah, the boat forward. I had never either until I was like, I have to transport them from Paris to Le Havre. I don't know how to say that. I can't speak a word of French. And
Mm-hmm.
so how I ended up understanding how this mechanism worked was I found an excerpt from chain boats would actually pull a convoy of barges down the river through this mechanism. And Mark Twain actually rode on one of these one time. He described it in some of his travels. So
Modern technology.
it was at the time. So I'm really excited. That's what I'm working on. And if anybody goes to historiesmagic.com, that's where they can see all the research I'm doing on that book. They can read the early chapters.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep putting chapters out until I'm finished with the book, and then I'll start trying to edit and finish it.
Excellent. So how do you market your books? That's the toughest part that I've talked to authors is just like you said, in COVID, they're just, I don't know how many new authors, or folks decided to become authors during COVID or right after COVID. There had to have been a tremendous amount.
Yeah, I think, all of the really successful authors I've met so far, went to Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of the guys to go and dress up in any of the costumes or any of that kind of stuff. And I love
Right.
a lot of science fiction, fantasy stuff, but I don't get like I met a lot of like people that were really into it. But they have a ton of stuff in Atlanta at Dragon Con around authors. And they have like panels and they have historical fiction, they have fantasy, they have
Mm-hmm.
4 different tracks. And some of the most successful indie authors out there uh, go to this. And I think a lot of them got into it, in the 2012 to 2016
Mm-hmm.
days of Kindle Unlimited. And
Mm-hmm.
the marketing was there wasn't that many books. And it wasn't.
Can you hold on a second? So you should you should try to rejoin. Yeah, and there'll be no problem. Excellent. That's pretty cool because it'll do this, but then I can cut it. So it's like
Oh, okay.
it's fantastic. Yeah. So talk about your social media.
Yeah, I'm doing TikTok. I've got Facebook. I don't really do anything on Twitter. I just repost things. I've got Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I don't have is, like I said, that passion. I think that really kind of drives my passion lies in writing and research right now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to be
You
switching
got to hire
gears.
somebody.
Well, I wish I could. I'm already in the hole enough as it is.
Oh yeah, me too.
But the podium thing hopefully will help. One of the things I learned was 50 to 80% of people's revenue are coming from the audio side of the
Mm-hmm.
house, which I was kind of stunned at. But I guess it makes a lot of sense in a fast-paced, high-tech world. Good thing they're professionals at that, and they're going to help promote and push those books. But in the meantime, the biggest thing that I learned from all those other, 7-figure authors that are indie authors that I spoke to, they were all like just right. And I think we've all some of the authors, we've all heard that it takes 6, 7, 8 books before
That's what I've heard. Exactly. That's exactly what I heard.
And having been in the startup world, I have tackled the author, the business side of it, very similar to starting a little startup. And
yep.
Even then, in all cases, in any industry, it is just so hard to get your message out there. In this case, we're not competing really with each other because we're competing with. We have a limited number of folks that probably are our target market, and that's where I go. I wrote Lamentations of Magic for myself, and I was like, there's got to be a lot of Indiana Jones Stargate fans that would love this, but how many of them are readers? I don't know. And there's no specific genre for what I've written that's cross genre thing, and so it has been very much a challenge. Whereas I think the book I'm writing for Luisa Sophia, it's a historical adventure. It's the cat burglar version of Enola Holmes. If you've seen the new Netflix thing, but there's a whole series of books that an independent, I don't know if she's traditionally published author put out about Enola Holmes. She fictionalized Sherlock's sister. And I think that's a very specific genre, and I think I'll be able to find that audience a little bit easier and target them. I want to try Google Ads. Haven't sat down and taken the time
I don't know
to do
about
it.
those. I've done Amazon ads that worthless. Facebook, mostly worthless. Twitter, I've never done any. Google, because the problem I have with any of those click here is because people click and have no intention of doing anything with that click, and they're paying for that click. Now, if they had a way that don't bill me until the click actually transitions into a sell or something, then I'd be for that, because now I'm not seeing a return on my investment, and that's what you want, because it is an investment. So I don't know. I haven't
The
figured
only
that
thing
out
I've
yet.
had real success with are the Kindle Unlimited, deals that
Yep.
you can put out combined with email marketing right now.
Yep.
You can do bargain booksy, you can do free, and even then, I think I've broken even once on those kinds
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
efforts. Um,
Yep.
but it's like you say, as we discussed, you have to have a backlog for people to keep reading your work
Mm-hmm.
because the cost of acquisition for that particular reader uh, is just too great for us folks that have two or
Yep.
three books. But you're
Yep.
kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you have to keep people coming or you fall off the
Mm-hmm.
radar. And so it is it's a difficult spot to be in. I'm grateful that I'm doing it, and I'm grateful that all these
Mm-hmm.
folks are doing it too. That they're chasing their
Mm-hmm.
dream. It makes it a very challenging new profession, and now
Oh
we
yeah,
have AI to worry about.
that's a whole different story.
So
That's a
yeah,
whole different.
that's a whole different podcast.
And I'm hoping to have
So
a panel early next year, authors, publishers, agents. We're going to talk. I want to talk about AI and the effect it's going to have on publishing. Narrator, right? On that. So, Russell, where can everybody find you?
and this kind of goes to my lack of marketing prowess. I've got three. I've got three different websites. You can find me at russellcowdrey.com. If you're a fan of Lamentations of Magic, I have lamentationsofmagic.com with a lot more information, a lot of great graphics, character portraits, and stuff like that. And then if you want to keep up with what I'm doing day to day and read stuff that I'm writing and read about the research, then historyismagic.com is really where folks should go for that.
Excellent. Well, folks, go ahead and support Russell and make sure that if you do read the book, put a review on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever, because that counts. Even if you just star rating or a sentence or a paragraph, what doesn't matter. That all helps authors for visibility within Amazon. To kind of float you to the top a little bit, which does take a lot. So,
Right.
Russell, it's been it was great meeting you, and I look forward to seeing some more of your books come out.
Well, thank you, Travis, for having me on, and I'm excited to see where your stuff is going too. So,
I'm writing my third book.
right.
I'm about 50 some thousand words into that, and then I had a new idea that popped in my head the other day that I'm doing starting to research. I'm going to do kind of that, and I want to do a children's book, and I have the whole idea. I just don't know how to write a children's book.
Excellent. I'm jealous of how many words you're putting out. I think on one of your other podcasts, you said you wrote your first book in 6 weeks.
Yep. And I think the one that I just had the idea for may be similar to that. And this one I'm doing a little different is I'm actually outlining or having everything what I want to research, and I have the premise of the book, and because I want to kind of shop it around, to be honest with you. So we'll see. Who knows?
Okay. Well, good luck. And
all right, good luck to you.
You take care.
Yes, sir. Talk later. Bye-bye.